My name is Suan. I'm 29 years old. I work as a planning supervisor at an advertising agency in Jiangcheng. That day, I took all of my father's documents and marched straight into the HR department of Xingshan Technology. I slammed the files down on the desk. Suppressing my anger, I said, "My dad worked his entire life, and his pension is only 817 yuan?
Does this make any sense?
The woman assisting me was over 50, an HR veteran in nearly 30 years, Sister Li Mei. She picked up the files and gave them a quick glance.
小君上，喷什么 A 行嘅3天應？
That's exactly what the system shows. How is that even possible? I asked, trying to control my emotions. My dad worked here for a full 31 years. He was even the deputy chief engineer. Hearing the words, deputy chief engineer, Li Mei suddenly looked up. Her eyes were filled with shock. I immediately pushed my father's credentials through the window. She took them and carefully looked them over. Her brow furrowed deeper and deeper. Wait here a moment. I'm going to the archives to check his HR file. Li Mei stood up and walked into the archive room. It took about 15 minutes before she finally came back out. Her expression was incredibly strange. Well, Miss Du, your father's file indeed shows a record of him serving as the deputy chief engineer. Then why is his pension only 817 yuan? I demanded. Li Mei stared intently at her computer screen. Her expression grew even more serious. Your father also has a core technical personnel stock option payout, which clearly belongs to one of our subsidiaries. It is paid out regularly every month. Hearing this, my heart skipped a beat. I held onto the counter for support, my chest tightening. A monthly payout of 3,000 yuan, but he only received 817? Where did the rest of the money go? The system shows that the payouts have been successfully deposited every month. Think directly into the payroll account under your father's name, Li Mei said, tapping on her keyboard. I instantly pulled out my father's debit card. Is it this card? The card number matches, but the system shows there's another bank card registered under his name. I froze. But my dad only has this one card. Li Mei frowned too. I can look up the details of the other card, but it requires his personal authorization. As I walked out of Xingshan Technology, my mind was in complete chaos. Over 3,000 yuan, stolen from him every single month. Over 9 whole years, that added up to a whopping 324,000 yuan. I immediately rushed straight to the head office of Jiangcheng Bank. I pulled out my 499 and my father's documents and said, "Excuse me, could you please help me check all the transaction history for this card? And please check if there are any other bank cards under my father's name." The clerk told me that to check all accounts under someone's name, the account holder had to be present in person. I quickly called my father. Half an hour later, my father rushed over. After verifying his information, the clerk started processing the request. Looking up, the clerk informed us, "Mr. Su Jiang-san, there are a total of 2 bank cards under your name." My father and I stared at each other, completely stunned. With a look of total confusion, my father said, "I've only ever used one card in my entire life. I've never opened a second one." "The other card was opened 9 years ago at our Jiangbei district branch," the clerk said. Hearing this, my father instantly panicked. His voice trembled slightly. I've never even been to Jiangbei district. How could I have opened a card there?" The clerk also looked puzzled. "But it was indeed processed officially, using your original 499. I immediately had my father sign the authorization to pull the transaction history for that other card. Looking at the printed transaction records, the clerk's expression grew more and more serious. Every month on the 25th, a deposit of 3,000 yuan is made into this card. But within 2 or 3 days of the deposit, the entire amount is withdrawn. It has been like this for 9 whole years. My head spun and my mind went completely blank. In an instant, it hit me. All these years, someone had been secretly pocketing my father's relinquished dividend payouts. I frantically asked if we could find out who made the withdrawals. The clerk explained that we could only obtain surveillance footage at the branch where the account was opened, or contact our company's legal department to follow official procedures. My father slumped helplessly into the chair, his face deathly pale. We rushed back to Xingshan Technology and told Li Mei exactly what we had uncovered at the bank. Her face turned pale with anger as she listened. She immediately decided to report the matter to the parent company's board of directors. Since the amount involved was massive, their parent company took it extremely seriously. That very afternoon, they called back. They decided to form a special investigation team, led by Zhang Trong, the legal director. We would head to Jiangcheng first thing the next morning to thoroughly investigate this dividend embezzlement case. At 9 o'clock the following morning, Cheng Chao arrived at the Xingshan Technology conference room right on time, accompanied by 2 auditors and a legal specialist. He was in his late 40s, dressed in a sharp black suit, with a sharp, piercing gaze and a highly efficient demeanor. He proactively reached out to shake hands with my father and me. Mr. Su, I am Zhang Cheng, the legal director of the parent company. The board of directors is taking this matter very seriously. Spreading the documents out on the table, he said, "We have already retrieved all internal company approval records and confirmed that Mr. Su Jingshan's relinquished dividend payouts have been distributed normally since 9 years ago. The monthly dividend of 38,000 yuan has never been interrupted. But where on earth did all that money go?" I couldn't help but press him for answers. Zhang Zheng explained. We found it. All the dividends were wired directly into that bank card that mysteriously appeared 9 years ago. We've already sent a lawyer's letter to the bank, demanding the complete account opening details and all transaction records. We'll have the results by this afternoon. I stood to the side, my hands clenched tightly together, my fingertips turning white from the tension. Yan Chao turned to look at the elderly Mr. Sifu. Please, think back carefully. Did anyone ever borrow your 499 card or any official documents 9 years ago? My father fell silent for a moment, lost in thought. Then he murmured, recalling. Back when I was still the deputy chief engineer, they told me they needed to process the paperwork for my dividends and asked me to hand over my 499 card and the originals of all my documents. Later on, they even had me sign several other documents. Who was it that asked you for them? My father's voice dropped to a low whisper.
Magician. Zhang Geng immediately jotted the name down in his notebook.
How long did he keep your 499 card?
About a week.
My father replied. He said he needed to take it to the company to run through the approval process and get it to me a few days later. He even told me all the paperwork was done. The speed, and all I had to do was wait for the dividends to come in. But didn't you check to see if the money actually arrived after that? My father lowered his head, his face filled with bitter regret. I did ask him, but he kept claiming that the higher-ups were still processing it and told me to just wait a bit longer. I waited for about 3 months in total. When I asked again, he just said it was almost approved. I felt too embarrassed to keep pestering him. I always thought the process was just incredibly tedious. I never imagined my old colleague, Old Ma, would backstab me like this.
Zhang Chao asked. We'd like to verify the situation with him in person.
Do you have his contact info? I'm not at home right now. I'm out of town on business, and I won't be back for the next few days. Ma Deshun's dismissive voice came from the other end of the line.
Zhang Zhao's eyes darkened slightly.
And he pressed further, asking where Ma Deshun was currently living. My father shook his head. He had no idea. Since he retired, we haven't been in touch at all. All I remember is that he went through the retirement process 4 years ago. The registered address is number 89 Changhar Road, Binjiang District. Jiangcheng. Note that down. Closing the notebook. Bliff. Blessing the notebook. We're going to find Ma Deshun right now. Miss Su, you can come with us, but try to avoid any direct confrontation with him. At 3 p.m., I followed Zhang Chong and 2 auditors to Changhar Road in Binjiang District. Ma Deshu lived on the 5th floor of an old residential building.
Zhang Gao raised his hand and knocked on the door.
There wasn't a sound from inside. He knocked a few more times, but it remained dead silent. Could he be out?
Zhang Chong pulled out his phone and dialed.
Hello.
Is this Ma Deshun?
This is Zhang Zheng from the head office of Inchin Technology. I need to verify some details with you regarding Su Jin-san's dividends. Are you free to meet and talk in person? Kem, a manicked voice came from the other end of the line. There's nothing wrong with the dividends. I'm out of town right now, and I won't be back for a few days.
Zhang Zhang's expression grew increasingly stern.
In a heavy voice, he said, Ma Deshun, I am formally notifying you. The company has formed a special internal investigation team to look into the embezzlement of Su Jan's dividends. Please return immediately to cooperate with the investigation. If you refuse to cooperate, we will have no choice but to report this to the police. Instantly, heavy, frantic breathing could be heard from the receiver. Ma Deshun stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. If your conscience is clear, and you're really innocent, why are you afraid? To show your face and cooperate? But before you could even finish, the call was abruptly cut off. Zhang Yong tried calling back, but the phone was already turned off. He definitely has something to hide.
Zhang Tang's face darkened.
He immediately arranged for a notice to be sent to all branch offices, requesting assistance with the investigation. The moment Ma Deshun used his 499 card, he would be able to pinpoint his location instantly. Over the next few days, the team followed up on clue after clue,
But Ma Deshun's whereabouts remained a mystery.
back at the office, the updates kept coming in. Ma Deshun's phone was still switched off, and there was still no sign of anyone at his home. His wife only said that a few days ago. He suddenly told her he had to go run some errands. And since then, he's completely vanished. The more I listened, the angrier I got. This was clearly a premeditated conspiracy to steal our money. Zhang Chang tried to calm me down. We also suspect it's intentional embezzlement, but we need concrete proof for everything. The police have already alerted all our local branches to keep a lookout. We'll find him eventually. But as the days dragged on, there was still absolutely no sign of Ma Deshun. I couldn't just sit around and wait anymore. I had to find a way to track down the clues myself. My family tried to stop me. Even the company can't find him. Where do you think you're going to find him, all by yourself? But I insisted. I'm going to the factory to ask around. Maybe some of his old colleagues know how he's been doing lately. The next day, I went to the old Inqing Technology Factory district by myself. The main gate looked exactly as I remembered. I tracked down Li Mei from the HR department. I got straight to the point. I wanted to ask about Baju. Li Mei frowned. But he retired years ago. I know. I just want to know if he has any family left, where he usually hangs out, and who his close friends are. Li Mei sized me up. What's your relationship with him? I'm Su Jingshan's daughter. When she heard my father's name, Molly, Nime's expression instantly changed.
Her tone softened with emotion. Ah, Chief Su.
He dedicated his entire life to this company.
Only for his pension to end up being so miserably small.
Honestly, all of us felt so terrible for him behind closed doors.
I seized the opportunity to ask, "Then do you have any idea where magician might be hiding right now?" Mimi thought for a moment. "I don't know,
His exact address.
But I do remember he has a brother who runs a restaurant in Jambay district.
the two of them have always been really close. If he's actively trying to hide from someone, he'd probably hide out at his brother's place. What was the name of the restaurant again?
I think it's called Shunfa Home Cooking.
It's right over in the old town area of Jiangbei District. I quickly jotted down the address and immediately headed straight for Jiangbei District. I went straight to Shunfa Home Cooking, planning to suss out the situation in secret.
Table for how many, ma'am?
The moment I stepped into the restaurant, the man behind the counter froze, his face going pale.
His eyes darted around anxiously. I stepped up and said, "I'm looking for Ma Shuai."
The man waved his hands frantically, trying to brush me off. "My brother, he isn't here."
He hasn't been here in ages.
But I could tell he was lying with a single look.
Taking a step forward, I stared straight into his eyes. "You're his brother, aren't you?"
I'm Su Jingson's daughter.
The man froze, completely stunned. Panic filled his eyes as I continued. "Your brother embezzled a whopping $4,100,000 in dividends from my dad. The company's special task force is hunting him down everywhere." In a cold, sharp voice, I warned him, "If you're helping him hide or deliberately covering for him, you will be held legally responsible."
The man's face drained of color.
I really don't know where he is."
"You'd better not lie to me." I pulled out my phone. "If you don't start telling the truth right now,
"I'm calling the police."
No. Please, don't call the police."
The man completely lost his cool. After hesitating for what felt like an eternity,
He finally let out a heavy sigh. He called me a few days ago.
What did he say to you?
he said he's down south, in Simon. He warned me not to tell a soul, especially anyone from the company. Where exactly by the coast? He can give me any details. Think? With a helpless look, the man added. I tried to convince him to come back and clear things up, but he refused, no matter what I said. He kept saying he let President Su, and that he accepts his guilt. Forcing down my rising anger, I demanded, "Did he say when he'd return to Jiangcheng?" The man shook his head. "No, he only asked me to wire him some cash and send him a few change of clothes. He told me to send them to a package pickup station." With that, he turned and rummaged through the back of the kitchen. Moments later, he came out with a shipping receipt. I leaned in, closely reading the recipient's name and address, and quickly snapped a photo with my phone. Once it was saved, I turned to leave. "Wait," the man called out anxiously.
Please, don't tell anyone I was the one who told you.
I didn't even look back. I just pushed the door open and walked right out of the diner. Back at Xingshan Tech, I handed the shipment details over to Zhang Deng.
Zhang Drek slammed his hand on the desk.
Fantastic. I'll contact our Xiamen branch right away and have them put a close eye on this pickup station. The moment he shows up to pick up the package, grab him immediately. Will you be able to bring him back without any trouble? I'm a little worried. As long as he's still in that area, there's no way he can escape.
Zhang Jar replied confidently. "I've already had our legal team prepare all the paperwork.
Once we catch him, we'll hand him straight over to the police." I breathed a small sigh of relief, but days spent waiting for news were pure agony. 3 days, 5 days, a whole week, and every single day felt like an eternity. My father remained silent all day long, looking as if he had aged several years overnight. "Dad, please, don't keep it all bottled up inside." I comforted him softly. My father slowly shook his head, his eyes filled with deep bitterness.
I just don't understand how old Ma could do something like this.
He was the person I trusted most in my entire life. No matter how desperate things got, how could he lose his conscience and stab an old colleague who trusted him in the back? Looking at my father's bloodshot eyes, I felt a painful mix of anger and heartbreak. Just then, my phone suddenly rang.
It was the Zhang.
"Miss Su, there's a new development." My heart tightened. "Did you catch him?"
"Not yet," Chao Chung said, keeping his voice very low.
"But we've uncovered some highly unexpected clues. There are some things I need to explain to you and Elder Mr. Su in person. Could you both come over?" His tone was incredibly grave, sending a sudden wave of panic through my chest. Without a second thought, I grabbed my father and rushed to Xingshan Technology. My mother hurriedly asked what was going on, but I only gave her a brief answer. The company found some new developments, and they want us to go over. When we reached the company's conference room,
请将跟我们跑日语为顶的下。
a thick stack of bank statements lay on the table. "Miss Su, we've pulled the complete detailed transaction records from Madishin's bank card," Zhang Ching said, opening his laptop. "We found something that doesn't add up." "What's wrong with it?" "Every month, after the dividends were withdrawn from this card, they didn't all go into Madishin's personal account." I froze. "Then, where did the money go?" Zhang Chong fell silent for a few seconds. He looked up at me. A portion of the funds was funneled into another, unidentified bank card. "We are currently verifying the cardholder's identity. He paused suddenly, his expression turning dead serious. I hurriedly pressed him. What is it? Just tell me.
Zhang Zhang took a deep breath
And slowly spoke. When we rechecked the bank system, we found that the accounts under old Mr. Su's name aren't just those two. My mind started buzzing
and I froze.
Wait. Didn't we only find 2 accounts before?
We only found the 2 active, visible ones initially.
But this time, after we ran a line-by-line audit on the transaction history, we dug up a 3rd hidden account.
Zhang Zhang clicked on one of the records. This card also has a regular, fixed amount being deposited into it. It is exactly identical to your father's monthly stock option dividend of 38,000 yuan.
I froze right there, a cold shiver running all the way down my spine.
What does that mean?
My voice trembled. Zhang Zhang hesitated, looking like he wanted to say something but stopped.
Finally, he spoke in a solemn tone. It most likely means that from the very beginning, your father's stock option dividend was secretly split in 2, funneled into separate accounts, and embezzled. No, that's impossible.
My voice shook uncontrollably. The 4th, my dad only gets an 817 monthly pension. How could there be a 3rd dividend payout? Zhang Zhang slowly shook his head. The system records are crystal clear. It was deposited on the 25th of every month without fail and has never stopped for 9 years. And every single payment was received in full. My heart was pounding wildly. I anxiously pressed him. Then where on earth was this money sent? Which card was it?
Zhang Zhang pulled up the corresponding bank statements and stared at the screen for a long time.
His face gradually darkened. He looked up at me, his lips parting slightly, but he hesitated to speak. My heart was thumping in my chest, the tension leaving me breathless.
Zhang Zhang fell silent for a few seconds,
then slowly turned the computer screen toward me. I stared at the endless lines of transaction amounts and statement records, my mind going completely blank. Just then, Jiang Xiao lowered his voice and said something that made everything go black. My knees buckled, and I almost slid off my chair. My father rushed to catch me, Shinon's palms already cold and sweaty.
Zhang Zhang let out a long sigh,
as if he had made a heavy decision, and said slowly,
the registered cardholder of the 3rd hidden account is indeed under old Mr. Su's name.
But the registered phone number and the address on file don't match at all.
He points to the information bars at the top of the screen. The phone number on file ends in 135.
The registered address is Yulid Court in the Jiangbei district of Jiangkang. The bank confirmed that this number has been used by the exact same person for years. Who is it? My throat tightens.
Zhang Zhang looks at my father
And then back at me.
In a barely audible whisper, he says, his name is Sujie.
It feels like a massive blow to the head. I freeze right where I stand.
Suja. That is my own brother's name.
Instantly, all the strength drains from my father's body. His grip on my arm suddenly goes limp. His sight is filled with sheer disbelief. What hours? Who did you say? I practically screamed the question. Suja. Zhang Zhong repeats solemnly. We have already done a preliminary check. The real name registration of the WeChat account linked to this phone number is also Suja.
My father opens his mouth. Father, Bigtus, your Hopakust and Phil.
But his throat is completely choked up. For a long time, he can't squeeze out a single word. His face as pale as a ghost. The meeting room falls into a dead silence, with only the faint hum of the computer fan buzzing in the background.
My chest feels suffocatingly tight, and my mind is a complete mess. I shake my head frantically. No, that's impossible.
How could it be Suja? He's only 35. He's in Guangzhou running a construction materials business. Every time he comes home, he buys tons of things for mom and dad. He's always so sweet-talking and thoughtful, so warm and kind to everyone. How could he ever do something like this? Could it just be someone with the same name? There are so many people named Sujie in Jiangshang. Jiangshang shakes his head gently. If it were just a matching name, we wouldn't have called you all the way here. He taps on the keyboard and pulls up another file.
The footage from when the account was opened 9 years ago is too old.
So the bank doesn't have it anymore. But the lobby surveillance footage from the past 4 years is still intact. And he speaks. He turns the monitor, making it easier for my father and me to see. On the screen is a bank surveillance screenshot. The footage is a bit blurry, but the silhouette of the person is clearly recognizable. Zoom in a bit more, I said, my voice cracking.
Zhang Cheng zoomed in on that section of the screen.
The young man on the screen looked up, speaking to the teller. A familiar, habitual smirk was playing on his lips. Look, that side profile. I knew them all too well. It was my brother, Suja. No one else has that exact expression. My father swayed violently, grabbing the back of the chair to steady himself. His entire body went completely rigid. This was 3 years ago, when he came to make a large cash withdrawal. He withdrew 250,000 all at once. Zhang Zhou pointed to the bottom right corner of the screen. The timestamp and the amount? Everything was recorded crystal clear. My head started spinning, and my vision went blurry.
In the footage, Sujie looked completely calm and relaxed,
as if he were just running a routine errand. There wasn't a single trace of panic in him. Zhang Zheng clicked open another surveillance video, This one was from a year ago. A withdrawal of 180,000. The exact same lobby. At the exact same counter. In the video, Sujia was wearing a gray hoodie
And around his neck was a black key necklace.
gleaming noticeably under the bank lights. I knew that necklace all too well. 2 years ago, during a business trip to Guangzhou, I went out of my way to visit him. He had just gotten that necklace and even bragged about it right in front of me. Every single detail matched perfectly. There was absolutely no room left for denial.
This is a blessed, real black key pendant, he had said.
As I stared at the screen,
A flood of chaotic memories rushed into my mind,
tightening my chest until it physically ached.
My father suddenly gripped the edge of the desk,
Bracing himself up with all his remaining strength,
as if terrified he might collapse.
his voice was cracked and trembling as he demanded, Are you sure you didn't make a mistake? My son has been doing business in Guangzhou this whole time. He is so busy with work. How could he possibly find the time to constantly fly back to Zhencheng just to do bank transactions? The dates on the surveillance footage are actually quite spread out.
Chen Cheng explained.
We cross-referenced every single date he appeared at the bank with his card transactions, and they match up perfectly. The timeline matches up. Almost perfectly. But even if the timing is right, it could still be a complete coincidence. Or maybe his voice was just shaking. I still couldn't bring myself to believe it. My brother is just an ordinary guy. How can they pinpoint him based on nothing but a single blurry security camera shot? How can they be so sure it's actually him?
Zhou Zhang looked deep to troubled.
We didn't want to jump to conclusions either.
Which is why we pulled the original account opening records from the archives. As he spoke, he pulled a stack of photocopies out of his drawer. He slipped the top sheet out and handed it to me. This is the application form for the third hidden bank account. I took it. My heart violently skipped a beat. In the name column, it clearly said my father's name, Su Jingshan. And the signature at the bottom was his too. But with just one look, I knew something was wrong. My father had been writing his entire life. His handwriting was always stiff, boxy, and a bit clumsy.
The strokes in this signature were carefully controlled, showing clear, awkward signs of someone trying to mimic his writing.
Zhang Zhang slid a second piece of paper over. This is the handwritten signature from Suja's college entrance exam application years ago. The two documents lay side by side on the desk.
I leaned forward, comparing them closely.
My palms began to sweat. The way the pen met the paper, the starting of the strokes,
The curves, the sharp hooks, the ending habits, they were identical.
they were written by the exact same hand, just with different names. My father stared blankly at the two signatures for what felt like an eternity. His voice shook as he finally spoke. Is this your official analysis? We had a professional forensics team run a handwriting comparison, Zhao Zhang said with a serious look. Their preliminary assessment is that they are highly similar. They are highly likely written by the exact same person. The air in the room instantly froze. I could literally hear the blood rushing and pounding in my ears. I shook my head, desperately trying to deny it. Even if he did sign it, someone else could have asked him to sign on their behalf. He might not have had any idea what that card was actually being used for.
Yang Xiang looked at me quietly.
Before turning his gaze to my utterly devastated father, his tone softened slightly. Look, we are directly accusing him of being the mastermind. We still need to bring him in for further questioning. But based on the evidence we currently have, he was at least fully aware that this card existed. And he personally showed up multiple times to make massive cash withdrawals. My father slowly sank back into his chair. His spine, which had been tense and rigid, now seemed to slump, as if he had aged 10 years in a single second. He stared blankly at the photocopies on the desk, his lips trembling slightly. But in the end, not a single word came out. I gripped the papers tightly, my knuckles turning white.
My knuckles turned white.
But I forced down my panic and managed to ask, where is he now? Have you guys contacted him yet? Not yet. Zhang Tong shook his head. Until we have solid evidence,
We can't just make a move.
we don't want to tip him off. Then he gave us a stern warning. One more thing. Now that you know the truth, avoid any contact with Sujia for the time being. My head snapped up. Why?
I demanded. Zhang Chong replied. From an investigative standpoint,
Once a suspect gets wind of an investigation, they're highly likely to transfer the remaining money, destroy evidence, or even change their address and flee. Zhang Cheng explained. Our absolute priority right now is tracking down where every single cent went. I grit my teeth, my heart heavy with a bitter mix of emotions. He's my own brother. Even if he did mess up, he wouldn't just run away.
Zhang Zhang didn't argue.
He silently gathered the documents on the table. We've already sent a request to the Guangzhou branch office, asking them to pull Suja's bank statements from the last few years, along with his travel logs and employment records. Once we get that back, we'll piece everything together to make a final call.
he was trying to sound gentle, but every word felt like a knife twisting in my chest.
Do you actually suspect he's in on this with Majisun? I demanded bluntly. Right now, we only see 2 overlapping transactions, Zhang Sheng replied, refusing to jump to conclusions.
Whether it's active collusion, or he was just used and blackmailed,
We won't know until we dig deeper. Just then, my father spoke up. His voice was raspy and weak. How much? How much of Madeshin's money was actually sent to my account? Referring to the third account, John Chuck opened his notebook. According to our preliminary check, it's roughly $1.5 million. The timeline spans from 6 years ago up until the end of last year. 1.5 million. My throat went completely dry. And the other 2.6 million? Most of it was withdrawn by Madeshun in cash in batches and transferred out of the city. The rest went into several unknown accounts. We're doing everything we can to trace them.
一样象牙的。
But we can already tell that those $4 million in kickbacks have been split up and practically squandered. My father kept his head down, his shoulders trembling slightly. Even when he first found out he was backstabbed by his old colleague, Ma Deshun, he was just angry and felt so wronged. He had never looked so completely hollowed out, empty from the inside out. His eyes were filled with nothing but despair and chilling disappointment. I wanted to reach out and pat his back, but my hand froze halfway. And the net, it just hung there. I forced myself to keep it together and asked, "So, how do you plan to investigate from here?"
We will put Madeshin
And Suzanne, along with his partner, on our list of key targets. And we'll trace the cash flow, digging deep into every single transaction. We also need to head back to the old factory to pull the archives from those years, to look into the original approval process for the stock options, and identify everyone who handled them. He looked toward my father, Elder Mr. Su, and said, "Please try to remember, sir, besides Ma Deshun, who else had access to those dividend files? Anyone from the factory office, accounting, or the division heads?" My father remained silent for a long time before slowly listing a few names. Back then, besides Badashun, the factory office also had a deputy director named Zhao Kei. Under them, there were 2 clerks, one named Sun and the other named Wu. In accounting, I only knew old Zhang. Everyone called him Accountant Zhang, and the deputy manager in charge was Wang Heita. Zhan Chang noted down every single detail. He closed his notebook. "We'll stop here for today. You should go home and get some rest. If Su Jie reaches out to you, please let us know right away." By the time we walked out of the office, it was already pitch black outside. The streetlights cast a dim, yellow glow, illuminating the empty, desolate road, mirroring the chilling emptiness and confusion in our hearts. The sycamore trees along the street swayed gently in the night breeze. My father's steps were incredibly heavy. He was barely moving, dragging his feet forward one step at a time. I rushed to catch up and called out, "Dad!" He stopped, but he didn't turn around. He just whispered, "One. Do you think? Could it really have been your brother who did this?"
My throat tightened up.
And my mind was in utter chaos. I didn't even know how to answer. I could only force myself to say, "We can't be sure just yet. No matter what, we have to find out the truth first." My father let out a long, heavy sigh, whispering as if to himself. When he was a little boy, he was so attached to me. When I had to work overtime, he would wait for me at the school gates all afternoon, all just to drag me back home with him. He raised his hand and wiped the corner of his eye. In a slightly raspy voice, he murmured, "Back then, I always insisted a son would be more successful than a daughter. But looking back now, I guess I was completely wrong." My heart clenched in my chest. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't utter a single word. The 2 of us walked in absolute silence the entire way, all the way back to the house. My mother was already waiting anxiously at the door. The moment she saw us, she rushed over and grabbed my arm. "Well, how did it go?
我只张相谢。
Is there any news about Badashun?" I hesitated. My throat felt completely blocked. Madishan hasn't been caught yet, but they found another bank card. "Another one?" My mother gasped, her face filled with shock. Whose else could it be? I looked over at my father. He stood with his back to us, slowly slipping into his house slippers. Every movement was so slow and heavy. He looked like an 80-year-old man. I grit my teeth and decided to keep it from her for now. "Let's just eat first. Panicking won't solve anything anyway." My father chimed in with a quiet, raspy voice. "Talking about it now won't help. Let's eat." My mother wanted to press for answers, but his words immediately shut her down. She had no choice but to carry the dishes to the table, muttering under her breath. The dinner that followed was suffocatingly tense. Hardly anyone touched a bite of the food on the table. The heavy, stifling silence was almost impossible to breathe in. My mother held her tongue for as long as she could, before finally slamming her chopsticks down. "What on earth are you 2 hiding from me? Did something terrible happen?" My father raised his eyes to look at her and said calmly, "It's nothing. The process is just complicated and taking time to investigate. Don't lie to me." My mother's eyes welled with anxious tears. "You both came back from the office looking like you'd seen ghosts. If nothing was wrong, would you look like this?" She turned her eyes to me. One, tell me the truth." My lips parted, but the words died in my throat, and I swallowed them back down. My father suddenly set down his chopsticks. His tone grew harsh. "Just stay out of this. This is a man's matter. We'll handle it ourselves." My mother was instantly choked up. Her eyes welled up with tears. She wiped her tears, deeply hurt. "You don't even trust me now? I've been with you for so many years. What kind of hardship haven't I endured with you? What crisis haven't we got through together?" My father closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. and slowly letting it out. I just don't want to drag you into this. My mother,
Her tears streamed down her face.
she was utterly heartbroken. Fine. You two can handle it on your own. I won't ask a single thing. And I don't care to know.
With that, she angrily tossed her bowl and chopsticks into the sink.
Turned around and stormed into the bedroom. The door slammed shut with a loud bang. Only my father and I were left at the dining table. I watched him staring blankly at a cold dish on the table, his eyes distant and empty. I spoke up softly. Dad, maybe we should just tell Mom the truth. He shook his head with a bitter smile. Tell her what? Tell her that my own son teamed up with outsiders to empty out my life savings? I was left completely speechless. If she finds out, she'll collapse on the spot. My father sighed. I can still hold on at my age, but she might not be able to bear it. I rubbed my throbbing temples, feeling a massive headache coming on. So, what do you plan to do next? My father fell silent for a long time, then looked up at me. Don't mention this to your brother for now. A surge of anger instantly rushed through me. Dad, now is not the time to be worried about family ties. Once this is investigated and proven, he's breaking the law. It's a crime. I know, my father said, his expression calm. His gaze was heavy. But I also know he is the person your mother loves the most in this world. If some things come out of someone else's mouth versus coming from me, the 8 is completely different. I instantly understood what he was thinking. He wanted to find Sujat himself and get a straight answer. I frowned to stop him. Are you planning to go to Guangzhou? The investigation team is still watching in secret. If you just barge in like that, you'll ruin their entire plan. I'm not going there to arrest his father or start a fight. I just want to ask him myself to see if he actually knows about this. His voice dropped a fraction. If he was tricked and used by someone else, I'll find a way to get him out. But if he willingly chose to join them in the mud, then I need to hear him explain himself to me with my own ears. I fell silent. Rationally, I knew I should tell him to calm down and wait for the investigation results. But looking at how exhausted and broken he was right now, I knew that if we did nothing, he would never be able to get over this. I'll go with you. The words slipped out of my mouth. My dad froze for a second. He shook his head, refusing. No, you don't need to come. You still have work to do. I can take time off. My tone was firm. I can't let you go alone. I'd be worried sick. Dad hesitated for a moment. Finally, he slowly nodded. Fine. We'll leave the day after tomorrow. Having set the date, he added, I'll go to the hospital first to get 2 days worth of medicine, and then I'll make up an excuse for your mom, telling her I'm going out of town to visit an old friend. How are you going to cover our tracks with Mom? I asked. I'll just tell her my old colleague Lee and the others invited me to a reunion. My dad's eyes dimmed slightly. Your mom never liked joining our old friends' gatherings, so she won't suspect a thing. That night, neither of us slept a wink. 3 a.m. I tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. My phone screen lit up and went dark, over and over again. Shuze's name just sat there quietly in my contact list. The last time we chatted was half a month ago. He had sent over photos of some new building materials, asking me what kind of style I liked for my home renovation. I even teased him, saying he was always so busy with his business, and asked if he was ever going to settle down. He sent a voice message back. His voice was as cheerful and playful as ever. Sis, you just don't understand what makes a man happy. I pressed the phone tightly against my chest, took a deep breath, and forced myself to turn off the screen. I couldn't contact him now. If I made that call, and he caught wind of what was happening, if they really transferred the funds like the investigation team suspected, destroying the evidence will only make things more complicated. Early the morning after next, Dad and I packed a few changes of clothes, keeping Mom in the dark by lying that we were going to Wuxi to visit some old colleagues. Mom kept nagging us to stay safe on the trip, but her eyes betrayed a hint of doubt. Why the sudden trip? She asked. Just 2 days ago? Didn't you say you wanted to rest at home? Actually, they've urged me to visit several times. And if I don't go now, they won't bother inviting me in the future. Dad slung his backpack over his shoulder. Mom rolled her eyes at him, but didn't ask anything else. Instead, she quietly slipped 2 boxes of pastries into our bags. She kept nagging and giving us 100 reminders as we headed out. She stood by the doorway, watching us leave, a deep, complex look in her eyes. It was as if she had figured something out, but chose not to say it. On the high-speed train to Guangzhou, Dad kept staring out the window, barely saying a word the entire way. As the train left Zhangchak and sped past endless fields, a thin mist blanketed the landscape. After a long silence, Dad suddenly spoke softly. "One. Yes?" I replied. His voice sounded tight, filled with endless helplessness. If we find out that you really did this, in partnership with Hemant Dashan, what are you going to do? I froze. This was the very question I had struggled with countless times over the past few days, but I never dared to say it out loud, only letting it echo silently in my mind. I don't know, I confessed honestly. Right now, I didn't want to lie to him.
And I didn't want to falsely accuse anyone either.
I just wanted to get to the bottom of this. Dad nodded slightly.
It didn't push any further on the heavy subject. It was already noon when the train arrived at Guangzhou East Station.
My brother Sujay lived in a newly built high-rise in Tanki District,
Not too far from the city center. The hallway was plastered with all kinds of moving advertisements.
The corridor lights were glaringly bright. I stood in front of his apartment door, my finger hovering over the doorbell, unable to bring myself to press it. Dad glanced at me,
Sighing softly before reaching out to knock on the door. Jia, are you home?
The house fell silent for a moment. Then, we heard approaching footsteps. The lock clicked open,
Just a soft click.
and the door creaked open just a crack. A tired face poked out. Who is it? But before Sujay could even finish his sentence, he froze completely. Dad?
Sis.
What are you guys doing here? We quickly threw the door wide open, welcoming us warmly.
Come in, please. Come on in.
It was a small 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't big, but it was spotless and incredibly neat. A few shirts hung on the balcony to dry, and the stack of construction industry magazines sat on the coffee table. Every corner was filled with the quiet, everyday traces of his life.
Why didn't you guys tell me you were coming?
He muttered as he poured us water. I stayed up all night working on a quotation sheet yesterday, and I could barely drag myself out of bed today. Dad sat on the sofa, his eyes slowly scanning the room, before finally locking onto his face. Have you been busy with work lately? Oh, extremely busy. Suzette smiled as he sat down.
It's peak renovation season.
Business is booming, so I've been working overtime every single day. I often don't finish until 10 at night. He placed 2 cups of warm water on the coffee table, then turned back to the kitchen to grab some oranges. How's Mom doing? Is her blood pressure stable? She's fine, Dad replied flatly. She just keeps nagging about you, saying you haven't been home in 3 months.
It's not that I don't want to. The company just wouldn't approve my leave.
Susha poked his head out from the kitchen.
But I've already booked my tickets.
I'll be back next weekend. He was as warm and talkative as always, endlessly chattering away about his life. But Dad couldn't bring himself to say a single word. He just stared at him in silence. I could see it in his eyes. Dad was desperately trying to separate the warm, familiar son standing right before him from that cold, shadowy stranger caught on the surveillance camera withdrawing the cash. He just refused to believe they were the exact same person.
Suji set down the fruit platter and sat down across from us. You guys traveled all this way just to see me?
Why didn't you let me know in advance? I'd have to pick you up from the station. It was a last-minute decision, I said, forcing a weak smile. It's been freezing in Jiangcheng lately, so I just wanted to get away for a bit and clear my head. He smirked, teasing us. Wait, aren't you guys the ones who hate traveling the most? Whenever I wanted to take you out before,
You'd always make excuses, saying it was too much trouble.
my father's lips parted slightly. Then he suddenly asked in a quiet voice,
Shit.
I've been tight on cash lately. Suj was caught off guard, but then he laughed. I'm doing fine, actually. My salary isn't top tier, but it's more than enough to get by. With that, he stood up and went into the study, pulling a few documents out of a folder. Look, here's my performance sheet from last month. I took it from him and glanced over it.
With commission and bonuses,
His actual take-home pay was $22,000.
in a city like Guangzhou, that's a pretty solid income.
Your income seems pretty stable, I said softly.
Of course it is, he said, boasting a little. Our department has always had a great reputation in the industry.
My father stared at the performance sheet for a long time before slowly setting it back on the table. Then, trying to sound casual, he asked,
So, do you usually do any investing on the side?
Investing? On the utensilites?
Shujai looked completely puzzled. Like trading stocks, buying mutual funds, or maybe helping someone handle certain transactions. My father did his best to keep his voice level.
Suju waved his hands dismissively.
No way. I don't touch any of that. A colleague dragged me into stocks once. I put in $3,000. Within 3 months, I lost everything down to $2,100. Since then, I've never dabbled in stocks or finance again. Suddenly, he looked over at me and teased with a grin. Hey, sis, are you trying to convince me to save money so I can chip in for your new house? I mean, if you really ask, I might actually consider... Cut that out! My father glared at him.
Suja pouted, looking slighted. Then why are you guys suddenly asking me all of this?
You both know exactly how much I make every month. Where would I get the extra cash to make some massive investment? His father's gaze slowly drifted down from his face, landing right on his neck. He was still wearing that familiar black key necklace. Only this time, there were a few more tiny scratches on it than when I last saw it.
His father lowered his voice to a whisper. Have you been back to Zhengcheng recently?
Of course I have.
Susha nodded without a second thought. Didn't I go back for the National Day holiday last year?
I still remember you fighting me for the TV remote that day.
That is not what I meant. His father locked eyes with him. Since last year, have you secretly gone back to Jiangcheng at all? Suja froze on the spot, looking completely bewildered. Secretly? What on earth would I need to sneak back for? He thought about it, carefully, then shook his head with absolute certainty. Seriously, I haven't. Work has been crazy at the company.
I literally haven't had a single second to spare.
What about the year before last? His father pressed him, step by step. From the year before last up until now, how many times in total have you been back to Jiangcheng? Do you really need to ask?
He smiled, counting on his fingers. Let's see. The year before last, once for Tomb Sweeping Day,
Once for the National Day holiday.
and last year, just once for National Day.
Once he finished speaking, he frowned slightly.
Looking us up and down. Dad, what is wrong with you guys today? You're acting so weird. I sat there on the side, feeling a cold chill slowly creep down my spine.
Soja has said all of this so casually,
His tone completely flawless, but I knew deep down.
At a moment like this, the more calm and natural someone acts, the less likely they are telling the truth. I chose that moment to test the waters. Then, have you had any dealings with banks in Jiangcheng recently?
like opening a new card.
Making wire transfers, or taking out a loan. Susha looked at me as if I just told the funniest joke and burst out laughing.
That is the most bizarre question I've ever heard.
That's evil.
You can do absolutely everything on mobile banking these days. Who in their right mind would actually go to a branch and wait in line to deal with that? He gestured with the phone in his hand,
His face completely relaxed and open.
his eyes were filled with genuine confusion,
With not a single hint of guilt.
On the surface, he looked completely calm and composed, without any sign of anything being wrong. Suddenly, Dad stopped questioning him and just leaned back quietly on the sofa, his gaze drifting, looking somewhat lost.
Suja looked at Dad, then at me.
His expression slowly turning serious. Lowering his voice, he asked, "What is going on with you two?
Did something happen at home?
Dad and I exchanged a quick look. Neither of us spoke immediately. And that's a beta quiz of a Stow innovation. After a brief, heavy silence, Dad finally let out a long, heavy sigh.
Looking at him, Dad slowly spoke. I came here today because I wanted to ask you about something.
What is it?
Sujir's expression tensed slightly. Dad continued. A few years ago, didn't I get promoted to associate chief engineer?
Yeah. Soja nodded.
The whole family was so happy back then. You even took us all out for a huge feast to celebrate. And after that, there was supposed to be an equity dividend payout from the company, Dad said, his voice deadly calm.
In theory, I was supposed to receive 3,800 yuan every month.
Shuja froze.
Then, he shook his head. What dividend? I've never heard of any dividend.
I didn't know at first either, Dad said calmly. It was your sister.
We went to the company a few days ago to demand an explanation. And that's how we found out.
The smile on Suzer's face slowly faded away, and his entire body instantly tensed up.
He looked at me. Why are you dragging me into this again?
The company's system shows that this dividend has been paid out normally for years,
I said, staring straight at him.
and every single cent went into a bank card opened under Dad's name. Susha's fingers curled inward instinctively.
His eyes darting around in panic. But the phone number linked to that card. I locked my eyes onto him. Is yours?
Instantly, every drop of color drained from his face.
The living room fell into a dead silence.
So quiet that even the faint hum of the refrigerator compressor was loud and clear.
Dad didn't say a word.
He just stared at him quietly with an incredibly complicated, painful look.
Suji froze, completely paralyzed for several seconds.
It was like he was only just processing what I said.
His lips trembled, slightly.
He mumbled under his breath.
What are you talking about?
You're saying there's a card opened under my dad's name, but the registered phone number is mine?
Exactly. I nodded, and we retrieved the bank's security footage. It caught several clips of you making large cash withdrawals at the counter. Suze's face went dead pale. Forcing a stiff, strained smile, he stammered, You guys must have seen it wrong, right? Bank security cameras are always so blurry.
How could anyone tell who it is?
The person in the video was wearing this black key necklace.
I stared at his neck.
I saw it when you first bought it 3 years ago. The design is exactly the same.
Suja hurriedly raised his hand to cover his neck.
A flash of unmistakable panic shooting through his eyes.
He opened his mouth, but for a long moment, not a single sound came out.
Aji, his father called out softly.
Suja looked up,
Tears already welling up in his eyes. Did you open that card? His father's voice was so faint, it was almost powerless. The air turned completely freezing. It felt as if time had stopped for an eternity. Suja took a deep breath, as if he had finally steeled his heart. He braced himself and forced out 2 words. Not me. His answer was quick and direct, but there wasn't a shred of confidence behind it. My heart tightened.
Just as I was about to demand answers,
My phone suddenly rang.
Jiang Zhong's name was flashing on the screen.
I had no choice but to step out onto the balcony to answer.
Miss Song, Jiang Yong's voice came through the receiver.
Sounding heavy and serious.
We found another bank card.
My heart leaped into my throat. I could hardly believe my ears. My throat tightened.
Under whose name? Zhu Gulan.
Syllable by syllable, Zhang Chou read out the name and 499 number.
The registered phone number. Everything has been verified. It's all your mother's personal information. My entire body went rigid. I whipped my head around to look at my father in the living room. He never read the look on my face because his eyes filled with absolute disbelief. My throat felt completely choked up.
And for the longest time, I couldn't squeeze out a single word.
That's impossible, my father muttered under his breath, his face turning pale.
Please, check it again. Could it just be someone with the same name? We've pulled the complete records, and we confirmed it is the exact same person. Zhang Zheng said with absolute certainty. This card was opened 10 years ago.
The registered employer listed back then was indeed Xingsheng Technology.
He paused, then added, the very first deposit was made 10 years ago, right after the company restructured its salary system.
10 years ago. That was the year the company suddenly notified my father that there was an error in his pension calculation.
They demanding he return the overpaid amount. From that moment on, my father's monthly pension was cut to a pitiful 817 yuan.
My chest tightened, with an overwhelming dread,
as a horrifying truth began to piece itself together in my mind. So, all these years the dividends my father waived were actually deposited into my mother's card?
I forced the words out, my voice trembling. According to the bank statements? Yes, that is exactly what happened, Zhang Kang replied. The money was deposited like clockwork on the 25th of every month, and by the 27th,
larger sums of money would be transferred out.
Where was the money transferred to?
I gripped my teeth so hard they ached.
战间仿狭揽后的 moment.
Before speaking slowly. It was split between two cards.
One belongs to Buttershin.
And the other is the very card Suja has been using all this time.
Hanging up the phone, I turned back to the living room. My father was clutching his chest, gasping for air, his body swaying precariously.
Dad!
I rushed forward to support him.
On the other end of the line, Zhang Cheng quickly tried to soothe us. Please, don't get too worked up.
We have gathered all the evidence.
Once you're back in Zhenchang,
We will discuss everything in detail.
After hanging up the call,
I raised my eyes and looked at Suje.
he froze right there in his tracks,
His face turned deathly pale.
shaking uncontrollably from head to toe.
Right then, he finally broke down completely.
Sobbing, he blurted out, "It was Mom! She made me do it!"
I knew nothing at first.
Father's head snapped up. His eyes were bloodshot, full of rage and disbelief. What did you just say? His voice trembled. Your mother? Susie's legs buckled, and he collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. Tears streamed down his face. 5 years ago, Mom came to me.
She said she had a bank card and wanted me to find time to withdraw money from it every single month.
She lied to me. She said it was Dad's secret stash of savings, that she was afraid you'd get mad if you found out. So she asked me to withdraw it for her instead. Choking on his tears, he kept explaining.
She said she saved this money specifically for me to get married.
At first, I had my doubts, but I couldn't resist her begging and constant nagging.
I was so stupid, so blind.
I actually believed her and did what she asked. It was only later, much later, that I realized it wasn't savings at all. It was Dad's waived dividend. Shu just sobbed, his entire body trembling violently.
But Mom said Mother Shun had already pulled all the strings, paid off everyone,
And that nobody could ever trace it. She warned me that if this ever got out, our entire family would end up in prison. I was terrified. I didn't dare say a word, so I had to keep hiding it. He slammed his head hard against the floor, kowtowing in despair. Consumed by guilt, he cried, Dad, I was wrong. I'm so sorry, Dad. Father stared at him blankly, his eyes hollow and distant, as if he didn't even recognize his own son. I rushed forward to pull Sujab. Don't kneel here anymore. Let's go home first and figure this out. The three of us immediately booked the earliest high-speed train back to Jiangchong. The entire journey was dead silent. Not a single word spoken. Father stared out the window the whole time, looking utterly devastated and lost. Sujai kept his head buried low, nervously wringing his hands, consumed by sheer terror. And there I sat, right in the middle. A cold shiver ran straight down my spine. My heart completely froze. It was just past 8 in the evening when we got home. My mother was sitting on the sofa, watching TV. As soon as she saw us come in, she quickly stood up. What took you guys so long? Was everything okay on the way? She asked as she poured some tea, acting like everything was completely normal. My father took the cup, his fingertips trembling uncontrollably. The cup rattled in his hand, making a faint clinking sound. He did his best to steady his voice.
Zhao Zhang found another new bank card.
Another card? My mother froze slightly.
Forcing a smile, she said, "Well, isn't that a good thing?
At least it means the money didn't just vanish into thin air.
That card.
My father stared intensely into her eyes. He enunciated every single word. Is under your name. The living room instantly fell into a dead silence. The sound from the TV faded into mere background noise.
The tissue in my mother's hand was instantly crumpled into a tight ball.
Her face instantly went pale and rigid. Her voice shook. What are you talking about? Did you hear it wrong? Zhang Zheng sent over the account details. The 499 number. And all the registered contact information. Every single bit of it is yours.
My father gripped his pants tightly,
his voice heavy with grief.
my mother's eyes darted around in pure panic. Turning her head to feign composure, she stammered, That was just an old payroll card the factory set up for everyone.
It was so long ago. Who could possibly remember that? It's been 10 years.
But a fixed amount of money has been deposited into this card every single month, my father said, his gaze dark and heavy. My mother's shoulders shuddered violently. She looked down, her eyes filled with panic. I don't know. I thought that card was canceled a long time ago. You don't know? My father let out a cold, bitter laugh. Then why is there a transfer going from your card to Ma Deshun's account every single month?
And why does the other half go straight to Ajay?
My mother's head snapped up. A flash of sheer, undeniable panic crossed her eyes. Then, her voice suddenly turned into a shrill reek. How dare you go behind my back and investigate me?
You're ganging up with outsiders to set me up. I just wanted to find out what happened to my dividends.
And where the hell all that money has gone over the years? My father took a deep, heavy breath.
Barely holding back his fury, he stared at his mother, his voice strained with restraint. He said,
If you were going through a hard time, you could have just told me. We could have figured something out, together.
What hard times could I possibly have?
His mother slammed the crumpled tissue onto the coffee table. Completely exploding, she yelled, All these years, I've been the one taking care of this entire family. Inside and out. Who else has been carrying this heavy load?
You only ever cared about your job. All you cared about were your bonuses and allowances.
Never planning ahead for this family.
In your heart, there's only your mother and your work. When have you ever actually cared about this home? When my mom was sick and hospitalized, costing over 200,000 yuan, I didn't utter a single word of complaint. When you and your sister went to school, got married, and started your careers,
I was the one pinching pennies and quietly keeping us afloat. I just wanted to save a little security for myself, just in case something happened to you. And I was left with absolutely nothing to rely on.
His father closed his eyes, tears slipping down the corners of his eyes. His voice was raspy as he spoke.
But you still shouldn't have done this. That share of the bonus was what I earned from working myself to the bone my entire life. How could you go behind my back and collude with Ma Deshun? How could you split it between yourselves in secret?
I didn't deceive you.
His mother argued back loudly.
That money belonged to this family anyway. Sooner or later, it would have gone to all of us. But you shouldn't have kept me in the dark. For 10 whole years, I actually believed my monthly pension was only 817 yuan.
The father's voice was heavy with exhaustion and heartbreak. The living room fell into a suffocating silence.
The father sat on the edge of the sofa, his back rigidly straight.
Looking as if you were facing a silent trial. My mind was in a complete mess. I wanted to say something to defuse the situation, yet I didn't even know where to begin. When did you first get mixed up with Ma Deshun? Did he come looking for you, or did you seek him out yourself? The father finally asked the question that had been weighing heaviest on his heart. The mother dug her fingernails tightly into the tissue and whispered, It was the year your salary was adjusted.
When he came over to our house for dinner, he brought up that he could help get you some extra bonus money.
But he said the process was really complicated, so he told me not to tell you just yet, just to avoid you overthinking it. Then, the monthly bonuses started getting deposited straight into my account.
Then, he used the excuse of needing to grease some palms
to push the approval through, demanding half of it. I hesitated at first, I really did, but he was always such a smooth talker, and he kept driving a wedge between us, saying that without him,
you wouldn't have gotten a single dime of these benefits. He paused, his lips turning slightly pale. Later on, he scared me again, saying the higher-ups were going to audit your retirement benefits.
He said if they found any issues, all of those bonuses would be completely clawed back, and we might even have to pay back everything we'd already received. So he told me to just switch the account to my name and quietly collect the money for you. Hearing that sent chills down my spine. And you just agreed to that so easily?
My father's eyes filled with deep disappointment.
I hesitated back then too. My mother choked out, her voice cracking.
But he kept whispering in my ear that your pension was so meager, and that you were always getting pushed around at work,
and that you only survived there because he was constantly covering for you. I wanted to confess to you as soon as I saved up enough money.
But as the years went on,
you trusted him more and more.
Every single day, all you talked about was how reliable old Ma was.
So, I felt like I couldn't say anything anymore. Then, when you two had a falling out,
he complained to me that you didn't trust him, and that things were getting too difficult to manage with the higher-ups.
He warned me never to bring up this money again.
Then why didn't you stop it right then?
Anger finally flared in my father's eyes.
I wanted to... My mother's voice suddenly spiked, before instantly dropping back down. But back then, your mother had just passed away.
You were so quiet all the time,
carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Whenever I brought up money, you'd get so annoyed. I spent those years constantly on edge.
So terrified that your health would collapse. I kept telling myself that the money was yours anyway,
and that I was just keeping it safe for you.
I thought, what if an emergency comes up later? At least we'd have it to fall back on. And you
You actually acted like the money Madasum took was just being saved for me?
My mother looked away, her eyes darting nervously.
She looked completely panicked. It wasn't until later that I found out he hadn't used a single cent of that money to pull favors. Instead, he used that cash to buy houses and cars. Got all. Think wonder it all. When I went to confront him, he just brushed me off, claiming he'd already secured a better under-the-table deal for you,
And told me to keep my nose out of it.
She looked at father with red, teary eyes.
You have no idea how terrified I was.
Terrified that you'd find out the truth one day.
And think I was in cahoots with him. Father let out a short, dry, bitter laugh. And are you afraid now?
Mother's breathing grew ragged in an instant. She was completely at a loss.
The company's investigation team has already stepped in, and next we'll have to give statements and cooperate with the investigation. Father's tone was calm,
Yet laced with ice. You'd better come clean about everything. Mother's face drained of color instantly.
She instinctively shrank back, her eyes filled with sheer panic.
Are they going to arrest me?
No one is trying to arrest you, Father said slowly. But you've already been deep in this for 10 years? How could you bear to hide this from me? Teaming up with an outsider and keeping me completely in the dark?
His voice suddenly cracked with hoarseness.
For these 10 years, I lived on a monthly pension of only 817 wine
And kept telling myself that times were tough for the company and that I should just be glad it was paid on time.
only to find out, in the end, that the money which belonged to me was secretly funneled away by you guys. Tears instantly spilled from Mother's eyes, all the strength leaving her body. She slowly collapsed into the corner of the sofa, her voice pleading. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to secure a bit of a safety net for this family. You wanted a safety net? Then why didn't you just tell me directly? Father looked at her. What on earth were you so afraid of? Mother opened her mouth, but no words came. After a long silence, she finally muttered under her breath.
I was afraid you would just give all the money to your mother's side again.
Father froze instantly. His face turned deathly pale and lifeless. After a long, heavy silence, he finally spoke, his voice dripping with exhaustion. So, that's what you really think of me? I've always been this kind of person. Even if you had just told me straight out back then that the money was kept under your name, I would never have stopped you. But you shouldn't have kept me in the dark. You shouldn't have lied to me like this. The air in the room completely freezes.
I feel like an outsider, trapped deep within this storm of a shattering family.
Forcing down the chaos in my mind, I speak as calmly as I can.
Now is not the time to argue over who's right or wrong.
The truth is already out. It's only a matter of time before the company uncovers everything. We need to figure out how we're going to cooperate and explain this. My mother looks at me. In her eyes, aside from panic, there's also a trace of guilt she can't quite hide. She mutters in resistance. I'm not going. If they ask, just tell them I don't know anything. I grip her shoulders. My tone is dead serious. Mom, this is too big to hide from now. I don't want to go to prison. She grips my arm tightly, nails digging deep into my skin. I've been law-abiding my entire life. I've never done anything wrong. If I end up behind bars, how will I ever face anyone again? If you hadn't conspired with Madashun to keep this a secret, how on earth did we end up in this mess? My father can't help but roar in a low, furious voice. I didn't conspire with anyone. My mother's eyes turn red as she starts arguing back. The two of them bicker relentlessly. The tiny living room is filled with their suffocating, angry voices. A sharp pain throbs in my temples. I lower my voice, trying to stop them. Stop fighting! Arguing about this now is completely useless. Breathing heavily, my father slowly sinks back onto the sofa. My mother wipes away her tears, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably. I pull out my phone and call Jiang Hong back, promising to bring my mother to the company tomorrow to cooperate with the investigation. After I hang up, the house falls back into an eerie, dead silence. The next morning at 9 o'clock,
My father, my mother, Suja, and I, the four of us, head to the headquarters together.
my mother is taken alone into the investigation team's office to give her statement. The three of us sat in the outer conference room, waiting. Dead silence filled the air. Footsteps echoed back and forth down the hallway. I lost track of how much time had passed. Finally, John Chung walked out of the office, a safe extremely grim. He looked at me, then turned his gaze to my exhausted, haggard father. Sir, your wife has already laid out the basic details of what happened. From what we can see so far, she knew full well the money was dirty, yet she still chose to help receive and route the funds. But she wasn't the mastermind. A few years ago, she even thought about stopping the transfers, and she questioned Madashun's excuses on multiple occasions. All things considered, the mastermind behind all of this is highly likely Madashun. My father's voice was dry and raspy. What's going to happen to her? The exact outcome will depend on the follow-up investigation and the court's verdict.
Jiang Jiang sat honestly. But we will make sure her active cooperation
And her clear remorse are fully documented in the investigation report to help push for leniency. Is there any news on Madashun? I asked hurriedly. Our Zimaman branch has already tracked his movements in the Jimei district, Sang Zheng replied.
He intentionally used an alias at a hospital, but the facial recognition
has confirmed his identity. If all goes well, we'll have in custody within the next 2 days. On the way home, the setting sun dyed the streets a deep, dark red. My father remained completely silent the entire way. As soon as we stepped inside, he walked straight into the bedroom
and shut the door behind him.
My mother sat alone at the dining table.
Coaching a crumpled tissue in her hand.
Her expression was blank and helpless.
Like someone who had lost her way. She spoke softly. If Medishun takes full responsibility,
And I cooperate and show a good attitude, do you think they'll be lenient with me? I leaned against the door frame, looking at her, and said softly, "You could have just confessed to me much earlier."
She raised her head.
Her eyes filled with exhaustion and bitterness. Every single time I got the bank statement, I wanted to just come clean and lay it all out.
but I was too scared.
Why? What were you so afraid of? I pressed her for answers. She replied, "Because your father, he trusted Ma Dashwan way too much." She shook her head with a bitter smile. If I told him that my Dashun was squandering his hard-earned money on luxury cars and houses, I meant picking to the Lamanides, that the only true friend he ever had in his entire life was secretly plotting against him and stabbing him in the back, it would have completely broken him. I was so terrified that if the truth came out, he'd lose his entire will to live. My throat tightened up. I was left completely speechless. My mother suddenly looked up at me.
Ever since you were a kid, you've been just like your father.
Always sticking to your principles.
Seeing everything in black and white, right and wrong.
But I'm not like you two.
I'm just an ordinary woman
Who only wants to protect this family.
and find a little bit of peace to lean on. Standing up for what's right and loving your family, they don't have to conflict. I looked at her and spoke softly. I've never ignored everything you sacrificed for this family. When I was little and got fevers in the middle of the night, you were the one who carried me to the hospital and stayed by my side. You quietly took care of every single thing in this house.
I've always known how much you love this family and how much you love us.
At that moment, my mother burst into tears. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm not going to turn my back on you. You're still my mother.
My voice turned serious.
But you were wrong to do what you did. And now, you have to face the consequences. She slowly lowered her hands from her face.
Looking at me through her tears, she choked out.
Will you ever forgive me? I stared at her. I suddenly remembered what my father once said. The ones I owe the most to in this life are you and the kids. A sharp wave of pain hit my chest. I didn't know if what I felt right now was forgiveness. To be honest, there's still a part of me that's hurt and bitter. But I'll give you time. And I'll give the rest of us time too. My mother stared at me in a daze. After a few quiet seconds, she nodded slowly. A tiny glimmer of hope returned to her eyes. Slowly, things started to quiet down. Even though there was still a lingering distance between us, the atmosphere was no longer as hostile and tense as before. 3 days later, news came from the Seaman branch. But Dishun was captured in a cheap motel. When they caught him, he was frantically packing his bags, preparing to flee the city. After he was escorted back to Zhangzhou, he first underwent an internal investigation at Xingshin Technology and was quickly handed over to the police. Our family was called in several times to give follow-up statements. The first time I saw Midashu down the office corridor, I almost didn't recognize him. The once arrogant, untouchable director who used to strut around my father's office was now wearing a crumpled, dirty jacket. His face was covered in scruff, his eyes shifting nervously, looking completely pathetic and defeated. Recruited by 2 security guards, he was led slowly past us. My father suddenly bolted up from the bench, his lips trembling uncontrollably. Madashan's eyes locked onto our family of 3 for a split second, before he quickly looked away. In that brief glance, there was panic, guilt,
And an indescribable trace of shame and avoidance.
Matisha. My father suddenly called out. His voice was raspy, yet incredibly powerful. In an instant, every footstep in the corridor stopped dead. The air itself seemed to freeze. Baidashin slowly turned his head, a brief flash of struggle crossing his eyes. I only want to ask you one thing. My father stared straight at him, the storm of complex emotions swirling in his eyes. Did your conscience ever hurt? Madison's Adam's apple bubbed violently. His lips twitched as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, he said nothing. He slowly hung his head and let the security guards lead him away. My father stumbled back, sinking onto the edge of the bench, his knuckles turning white as he clenched his fists, his entire body trembling. Dad. I rushed forward to support him. He just shook his head weakly, his eyes filled with nothing but exhaustion and bitter heartbreak. He couldn't utter a single word. Once the case officially entered the judicial process, our lives were violently dragged onto a completely different track. Since Mom fully cooperated with the investigation, and confessed everything, honestly, while actively returning most of the illegal gains, she was granted leniency. Suje, acting as an accomplice, came clean about everything on his own initiative. Because he showed true remorse, he ultimately avoided criminal charges and got off with just a warning from the police. To scrape together the money for restitution,
No, Dad insisted on selling our old house back home. He even wanted to empty out the savings we'd set aside for Suja's wedding.
I tried desperately to stop him.
But he was dead set on it. This is a debt I have to pay, he said.
No matter who the court awards this money to, at least I won't owe anyone anything anymore. I can't keep lying to my own conscience.
But Dad, you don't have to do this, I pleaded, my eyes welling with tears. Dad let out a bitter laugh, his eyes drifting toward the kitchen.
Am I supposed to let your mother take the fall for everything by herself? His voice dropped.
Even if I resent her,
She's still the one I've spent my whole life with. And after all, she is your mother.
hearing those words,
There was a faint rustle from the kitchen doorway
Mom's shadow swayed slightly.
before she quietly turned and slipped back inside. But I clearly saw her shoulders trembling.
On the day of the trial,
The sky was dark and gloomy.
heavy, low clouds seemed to press down on us.
And the air was so thick and damp, it felt like it would pour at any second.
I accompanied my parents to the courthouse.
Suja couldn't make it because of work,
But he kept calling, pleading with us to let him know the moment there was any news.
As Madashon was led to the defendant's stand,
His steps were unsteady.
and he kept his head hung low.
the prosecutor began reading the indictment.
Each charge sounded clear and heavy. Embezzlement of an exceptionally large sum, conspiring with others to illegally misappropriate company funds. Every single word cut through the small courtroom like a knife, slicing deep into our hearts.
Mop sat in the gallery.
Her hands desperately clutching the hem of her shirt, her head buried low.
As her shoulders trembled,
When it was her turn to take the stand,
Her knees buckled.
and she could barely stand.
I rushed forward to support her.
What is your relationship with the defendant, Madashun?
The judge asked.
We were old colleagues. My mother's voice trembled.
Filled with unmistakable guilt. Were you aware that this bonus payout processed by Madashun was not a legitimate distribution?
My mother fell silent for a long time.
Tears silently rolled down her cheeks, dripping onto her clothes.
I found out later.
She said, her voice hoarse, weighing every word. But at first, he told me it was an extra bonus from the organization for Lasu.
And asked me to accept it on his behalf.
Saying he would hand it over to Lasu once the paperwork went through.
She laid out the entire story from beginning to end, holding absolutely nothing back.
from Madashun's initial instigation to his later threats.
To her own hesitation and wishful thinking.
She confessed everything. Meanwhile, the court reporter's fingers flew across the keyboard
Typing out line after line.
of cold, hard text,
Recording the truth that had been hidden for 10 years.
when it was Bajushin's turn to confess.
He remained silent for a long time before finally speaking. I plead guilty,
His voice was barely a whisper.
yet carried a hint of relief. It was my own greed that started this.
I was the one who came up with the idea. The judge looked up. How exactly did you carry it out?
Madashin let out a bitter laugh, his eyes filled with deep regret. At first, I really just wanted to get some extra benefits for Lasu.
But who knew the policy would change that year? The official document sent down had a much higher bonus amount on it.
In a moment of sheer madness,
I decided to pocket the difference.
he paused, then added, "In the beginning, I did transfer a portion of the money to his family.
But when I saw they never checked the accounts or suspected anything, I grew bolder and gradually pocketed most of it myself.
Why did you drag Dulilin into this?
The judge pressed.
I was scared. Madashun's throat went dry.
His eyes darting away in guilt. If I took all that money by myself, it would be too obvious. It would be too easy to get caught. So I lied to Lu Glan and told her it was old Sue's share of the profits, and asked her to collect it on his behalf. That way, it wouldn't draw any attention. He glanced at my mother, then immediately looked away.
His voice carried a hint of guilt.
I know he hesitated at first too. He was terrified of getting caught and wanted me to stop. But back then, I was completely blinded by greed. So I lied to him, saying the process was already finished and that there wouldn't be any problems. As he spoke, he suddenly looked up, his eyes fixing on my father.
His voice was choked with deep regret. Old Sue,
I am so sorry. My father had been keeping his head down this whole time. But at that moment, he finally, slowly looked up.
their eyes met briefly in the air.
I didn't see the rage I had expected from my father. There was only a bone-deep exhaustion and a sense of relief.
The one you let down isn't me."
My father's voice was slow and calm. It's yourself. It's your own conscience that you've kept for decades. It's the reputation you destroyed with your own hands. Silence fell over the courtroom.
Nobody said a word.
The only sound was the occasional gust of wind outside the window. After a full day of trial, the court delivered its verdict. For embezzlement, Madashun was sentenced to 13 years in prison, deprived of his political rights for 3 years, and ordered to return all illegal gains. My mother was found guilty as an accomplice, but since she played a minor role, confessed voluntarily, and actively returned the money, she was sentenced to 3 years in prison with a suspended sentence of 6 years. The moment she heard the words, suspended sentence, all the strength seemed to drain out of my mother's body. She collapsed back into her chair,
Covering her face. As she broke down,
sobbing uncontrollably. In her tears, there was guilt, lingering fear, and a tiny shred of relief for having survived the ordeal.
My father remained silent.
She just reached out slowly and gently patted him on the back.
That single touch felt like a goodbye to the walls between them.
And a long overdue forgiveness. As they walked out of the courthouse doors, a light drizzle had started to fall. The fine mist hit their faces with a slight chill. The steps were slick and wet. The crowd from the hearing slowly dispersed. Everyone heading their separate ways, Father looked up at the gray, overcast sky and let out a long, deep sigh, if a massive burden had finally been lifted.
Dad, I'll hold the umbrella. I quickly opened it and stepped beside him. Father nodded,
his eyes drifting to the hazy street just ahead, but it looked as if he was staring back at a time long gone. At least we finally have some closure, he murmured. Mother stood right beside us, clutching her bag tightly against her chest,
her eyes somewhat dazed.
You'll have to report to the judicial office on time from now on.
And you'll have to participate in community service. We can't afford to make any more mistakes, I softly reminded her. Mother gave a gentle nod, letting out a quiet, I know. On the car ride back, the car was completely silent, save for the steady rhythm of the windshield wipers. Suddenly, Father turned to Mother and said, "From now on, you're in charge of the family finances." Mother froze in shock, as if she hadn't heard him correctly. Staring blankly at him, she stammered, "What did you say?"
I said I'm handing over all our money to you, Father replied,
looking out the window. His voice was calm. I used to think I was the one who knew the rules best, and that I knew exactly how to handle things. But in the end, I was completely blind, and I dragged you and the kids down, making you all suffer so much. Mother parted her lips to speak, tears welling up in her eyes once more.
But she fought them back, refusing to let them fall. But on one condition. Father paused, turning to look at her with absolute sincerity. From now on, no matter what happens, you have to tell me.
More keep down secrets. We carry this burden together, as a family.
My mother nodded hard, raising her hand to wipe the tears from her eyes,
Choking back her sobs as she said, "Okay, I understand."
At that moment, I suddenly felt that this crisis that had swept through our family wasn't just a devastating blow to them. It was a long overdue moment of laying all the ugly truths bare. All the emotional distance buried beneath the years.
The suspicion and the denial were forced into the open,
exposed to the harsh light of day. Whatever was meant to rot, rotted. Whatever was meant to go moldy, went moldy. And whatever was left was what could actually withstand the test of time and truly hold this family together. 3 weeks after completing all the paperwork,
I received a notice from my office.
Regarding my previously suspended promotion evaluation, my boss told me that since the dividend fraud case had nothing to do with me, the suspension had been officially lifted. He told me to prepare for next week's promotion defense. During dinner that evening, I shared the news with my parents. That's good. That's really good. My father set down his chopsticks, a long-lost smile appearing on his face. But your job is still the most important thing, so prepare well and don't get distracted. My mother looked up at me, then lowered her head, quietly pushing the rice around in her bowl. She didn't say anything, but I could see the relief written all over her face. I'm going to the old factory district tomorrow, my father suddenly announced. What for? Mother Muddy immediately asked, her voice tense. The court has already ruled on the case. Why do you still need to go there? I owe them an explanation, my father said, his tone calm, yet exceptionally firm. Over the years, those dividends came from the company's special fund. Even though my fashion is the one to blame, it still happened under my watch. I have to explain the situation to them in person, and apologize. But the court already made its ruling. It's not your fault, my mother said anxiously. She quickly tried to persuade him. There's no need for you to go looking for trouble.
The mistake wasn't mine.
But I just can't let it go. My father nodded. They trusted me back then. Only then did they finally give me my full share of the dividends. I can't just pretend nothing ever happened. He turned to look at me. If you're free tomorrow, would you come with me? I immediately nodded and agreed. First thing the next morning, I went with my father to the old Jingson technology factory. The factory had long lost its former hustle and bustle. Most of the workshops were shut tight with metal shutter doors. The paint on the walls was cracked and peeling, showing the heavy wear and tear of time in every corner. The old gatekeeper stared at my father, completely frozen, before he finally recognized him. He stood up in pleasant surprise. "Mr. Su, it's really you. I haven't seen you in years." My father smiled and called out to him. "Old what then?" "Long time no see. Look at you. Your beard has gone completely white." The two of them caught up and chatted about their lives. And when they brought up the old days, their eyes were filled with deep emotion. Only then did my father explain why we were there. The old gatekeeper quickly led us to find the current factory manager. The current manager showed us into the meeting room.
After listening closely to my father's story, he fell silent for a long time.
Finally, he let out a long, heavy sigh. "Mr. Su, you really don't need to take this to heart. The loss was mainly from the company's special funds. We will recover it in accordance with the regulations. It has nothing to do with you."
But it happened under my name, after all.
And I just can't make peace with that.
My father said, I can't just pretend I didn't see anything. And I certainly can't let the company suffer losses because of me, or let our people lose heart.
The manager looked at my father and suddenly smiled. When you think about it, this money was yours to begin with. It's what you earned through a lifetime of dedication and hard work for this company. No one has the right to say a single bad word about you. He paused, his tone filled with deep regret. But Matsun, he really broke our hearts. He betrayed your trust, and he let down the company that raised him. When we walked out of the building, the sun was shining beautifully. The warm sunlight fell upon us, chasing away the gloom of the past few days. My father looked up at the deep blue sky, and a genuinely relieved smile appeared on his face. A smile of letting go, of integrity, and of hope for the future. The sunlight spilled softly across the ground. Shadows of the trees danced on the ground. Dad stopped right at the entrance of the old Zinshin technology factory. He looked back at the rusted company sign. Suddenly he spoke up. Back when your brother got into college, I stood right here and called him. I froze for a second. Then I remembered that summer when Suda, full of youthful pride, said the world outside was massive and that he didn't want to come back to Jiangcheng. He wanted to go out and make a name for himself. Dad smiled and shook his head. I was actually pretty disappointed back then. I felt like his wings had grown strong, and I couldn't keep him here anymore. Are you still disappointed now? I asked softly. Dad fell silent for a few seconds. Then he slowly shook his head. Looking back now, if your brother had come back then, he probably would have been dragged into this mess with me. It only would have brought him endless trouble. My heart ached, and I couldn't say a word. Let's go, Dad said, pulling his gaze back. His voice was calm. Let's go light some incense for your grandparents.
That day, we went straight to our hometown.
The concrete road at the entrance of the village was paved much wider than before,
But the old locust tree in front of our old house was still there. Only, its branches and leaves weren't as lush as they used to be, showing the heavy wear and tear of time. We crouched in front of our ancestors' graves and cleared away all the weeds, one by one. We lit the incense sticks. Dad crouched in front of the grave and didn't say a word for a long time. The wind blew across the fields, carrying the faint scent of soil and a strange, indescribable melancholy. Dad, I called out softly. Dad raised his head and stared at the words carved on the tombstone. His gaze was distant and heavy. I used to think that the one thing I did right in my life was serving the company. I worked diligently for decades without making a single mistake. He let out a self-deprecating laugh. But now, I finally realize the ones I let down the most were your mother, you, and your brother. I opened my mouth. I wanted to speak up, to tell him that he had already done so well. But the words caught in my throat, and I couldn't say a thing. All those years, he had been so consumed by work that he really had ignored what was weighing on Mom's mind. And he had ignored our feelings too. Back then, what your mother was really going through, I never really took the time to understand. My father sighed deeply. His voice was heavy with guilt. I thought, as long as I saved up some money for you, kept you fed and clothed, I was doing my duty as a husband and a father. But I never once asked her what she actually wanted. I never cared about how anxious and lonely she felt. He reached out and gently patted the tombstone twice. In a low, cracking voice, he whispered, Mom, Dad, if you two were still here, you'd probably give me a good scolding. You'd call me a fool and tell me I don't know how to cherish the people who love me. Saying this, he stood up and bowed deeply 3 times to the tombstone, his posture filled with quiet reverence. On the drive back to the city, the car was dead silent. Suddenly, my father turned to me. When are you free next? I want you to take your mother back to her family's place for 2 days. I froze. She won't want to go. She'll think you're kicking her out. I'm not kicking her out, my father said, shaking his head. His voice softened. I just want her to step away from everything in this house and get some breathing room somewhere else. She needs to just rest. She's been through so much pain lately, and the knots in her heart will take time to untie. He paused for a moment before adding, I need to leave for a while too. Where are you going? I asked, my mind flooded with confusion, yet somehow I understood. I want to visit the place where your grandfather was stationed when he was in the army, he said. Looking at my father, I saw a flicker of stubborn, youthful determination in his eyes. I've wanted to go since I was a young man, but I never got the chance. This time, I want to finally fulfill this wish. I looked at his face, lined with the deep wrinkles of time, and gave him a gentle nod. Don't worry, my father smiled, his tone surprisingly light. I'm not going to do anything foolish. I just want to see the world from a different perspective and sort through everything that's been weighing on me all these years. A few days later, my father indeed bought, on the day of his departure for that small town in the northwest, my mother, Suje, and I saw him off at the station. The platform was crowded with people coming and going. The station speakers kept blaring train announcements, noisy yet full of the warm, down-to-earth hustle and bustle. My father was carrying an old backpack,
packed with a few changes of clothes,
a worn-out notebook on machine maintenance,
and a small box of ashes.
It had been retrieved from the cemetery, a small portion of my grandfather's ashes. He wanted to take Grandpa to see the places where he had once fought.
Take good care of your mother for me, my father said, holding my hand.
Whispering, he urged me. She might act tough, but she's actually incredibly soft-hearted.
She can't handle being hurt, so don't let her bottle everything up inside.
I nodded vigorously. Dad, don't worry, I will.
He then turned his gaze back to my mother,
Hesitating for a few seconds.
In the end, all he said was, "You take care of yourself too.
Don't work too hard."
My mother kept her head lowered,
Her eyes red. Without saying a word,
she just nodded gently. If your mother ever brings up money with you,
Just tell her that I've never really had any concept of money.
the only thing I ever truly cared about was the people, my father added.
The train's arrival bell rang,
And the crowd began to surge forward.
All right, I'm off.
My father picked up his backpack, turned, and walked toward the ticket gate. But halfway there, he suddenly stopped, turned back, and waved at us, a faint, relieved smile on his face. At that moment, a strange feeling suddenly washed over me. After being a husband for so many years, for the first time, he had truly stepped out of his role as a rigid, stoic, retired worker, and became an old man living for himself. Just this once, the train slowly began to move, the wheels screeching against the tracks in a long, low rumble as it gradually drifted into the distance. My mother stood at the edge of the platform,
her eyes locked onto the retreating train.
until the very last car vanished into the horizon. Only then did she slowly look away, her eyes completely bloodshot.
"Let's go," I said, gently pulling her arm, but she didn't budge. She only raised her hand to wipe the corners of her eyes.
"Your dad used to chase the train just like this when he was young," she said softly. I froze for a moment. Back then, it was his first time going out of town for technical training. It was at this exact station,
And I was the one who sent him off.
my mother stared into the distance.
With a far-off look in her eyes.
I stood right here, watching the train pull away, and my heart was in an absolute panic. I kept thinking, what if this man doesn't want me anymore? What if he never comes back? She gave a self-mocking laugh.
But in the end, he did come back.
He spent his entire life protecting this home, protecting us. This time, he will come back too.
I comforted her in a soft voice.
My mother nodded
And quietly whispered.
Her voice choked with a slight sob. During that time, while I threw myself back into work,
Pitsy preparing for my promotion defense.
I was also helping my mother handle her community correction affairs. The officers at the judicial office spoke in a calm, gentle tone. They told us that as long as my mother reported in, as required,
And participated in community service, she could live a normal life at home.
her personal freedom wouldn't be restricted. The first time my mother went to report, she was incredibly tense and uneasy.
When she came back, she carefully tucked the stamped supervision record into the deepest corner of her drawer.
It was as if that paper wasn't a document of restriction, but a license to start over. A proof of forgiveness. That night, during dinner, the dining table felt incredibly empty without my father. After just 2 bites, my mother put down her chopsticks. "I can't eat," she whispered. I gently placed some food into her bowl. "You have to eat something, otherwise your health will give out." She stared at the food in her bowl, falling silent for a long time. Suddenly, she looked up and asked, "One, do you do? Do you blame me?" I was taken aback. "Your dad, he would never scold me," she murmured. His voice shook. At most, he would just let out a sigh and swallow all the pain in silence. "But you're different. You've always known right from wrong. Deep down, you probably blame me, don't you?" I remained silent for a long time. To be honest, yes, it hurts, and I am so confused. You did it all for this family, but you went about it in the worst possible way. And because of that, you made all of us suffer so much alongside you. But I don't know how to blame you, because I know how anxious and insecure you felt inside. And your love for this family is completely real. My mother lowered her head, her lips trembling slightly. Ever since you were a child, you always listened to your father the most. Your moral compass is straighter than anyone's. You never play favorites. She raised her hand to wipe her eyes. But in life, you can't just rely on logic and reason. Sometimes I was just pushed to a corner and had no other choice. Mom, I know. I squeezed her hand. Reason and love don't have to conflict with each other. I've never denied everything you've sacrificed for this family. I paused to think,
And said softly, "Last year, when I was hospitalized with a high fever,
you stayed by my side for 3 days and 3 nights. Your eyes were completely bloodshot. Dad was back in our hometown at the time. So you were all on your own, running around to fetch you my water, feed me, wipe my body, and change my clothes. But you never shed a single tear."
my mother's tears instantly began to fall.
Landing on our clasped hands. "All these years, I've never once doubted your heart for this family. I've never doubted that you love me and my brother, or that you two love this home. I took a deep breath, my voice turning solemn. This time, you went about things the wrong way, and you made a mistake. But that doesn't mean you're not a good mother. And it doesn't mean we're going to abandon you. I will never disown you as my mother, and I won't let you carry all this guilt and regret on your own. My mother slowly lowered her hands and looked at me, her eyes filled with gratitude and remorse, though tears were still streaming down her face. There was a newfound sense of relief in them. My father started calling from out of town from time to time, sounding much more cheerful than before. He became much more talkative, too,
Chatting about how delicious the beef noodles were in that small northwestern town, and how he ran into an old soldier in the Gobi Desert.
The two of them had ended up talking for a whole afternoon. Whenever he brought up those years, his heart was always filled with deep emotion. He said he planned to visit the railway that grandfather had helped build all those years ago.
To see the tracks they had paved with their youth and life's blood. Every time Mom answered his calls, she would always start by telling him to take care of his health.
Then she would ask if he had enough money. Only at the very end would she carefully ask, "When are you coming home?" Dad never gave her a definite date. He would just say he wanted to travel a bit further, see a bit more. But I knew he needed this journey. He needed this time alone to find an outlet for all the unfair treatment, the anger, and the resentment he had carried for all these years, and to finally make peace with himself. 1 month later, the company finished recalculating Dad's retirement benefits. They sent over a formal letter of apology, admitting there were major gaps in their payroll management, which had caused Dad years of distress and financial loss. They also promised to pay back all his unpaid bonuses in full. When we received that letter, Mom stared at it for a long, long time. Her eyes were filled with mixed emotions. The doctor was right. If your dad had gotten this letter a few years earlier, he probably wouldn't have had to suffer so much, and our family wouldn't have had to go through so much heartache. A few days later, the company notified us to come in and complete the paperwork. I went along with Mom. The staff there were incredibly polite. They explained the new benefit standards in detail,
And even paid out the back pay that Dad was owed.
and we walked out after finishing the paperwork. Done. Mom was clutching that small savings book, her palms dripping with sweat. She looked at me.
Dad asked hesitantly, "Should we put the money into your dad's account?"
I nodded. Yeah, let's do whatever he wants. Do you think... She hesitated for a long while before continuing. I should call your dad and let him know. Just say whatever is on your mind. There's no need to be so tense. I smiled, encouraging her. Mom dialed Dad's number. He picked up almost immediately, and a noisy background drifted through the line. You could faintly hear the rushing wind. What's wrong? Dad's voice sounded light and cheerful. The company. They recalculated your retirement benefits, Mom said, her voice trembling slightly with nerves. From now on, you'll be getting a lot more money every month. Yeah, that's good. My father's voice was incredibly calm. There's also a sum of back pay. My mother lowered her voice, saying, I've transferred it all to your card. My father chuckled on the other end. Just keep it for me. I don't need it. My mother froze for a moment and hurriedly said, Aren't you going to check? What if they shortchanged you? What's there to be afraid of? My father's laughter came through the receiver, filled with relief. The company is keeping a close eye on things this time. No one else would dare pull any tricks, so it won't be a penny short. He paused, then added, Spend it however you like. Don't try to save it. This money was always meant for our family anyway. It's for you and the kids to spend. My mother's hand holding the phone trembled slightly, her voice cracking with emotion. I won't touch your money anymore. I can take care of myself. Now. Don't be silly. My father corrected her. It's not my money. It's our money. Take it and buy one some jewelry.
Or save up for Essay's wedding fund. Anything is fine.
Just don't keep trying to skimp and save. I stood by their side, listening to their conversation, and a bittersweet warmth suddenly welled up in my chest. All the past misunderstandings and suspicions, all the unspoken grievances. It felt like they were all slowly melting away in this simple conversation. After hanging up, my mother flipped through the passbook once more and finally placed it carefully inside the drawer, right next to that community correction document, as if she were treasuring two hard-won symbols of peace. From now on, this ledger? She looked at me, her eyes filled with determination. We will manage it together. If anything happens, I'll talk to you and your dad. I won't keep secrets anymore. I nodded vigorously. Okay. Another month or so passed, and my father finally said he was coming home. On that day, my mother, I, and Joja headed to the station early. There were far fewer people on the platform than last time. The sunlight slanted down from above, shining bright on the metal tracks. Warm and beautiful. The train slowly pulled up to the platform. The doors opened, and a stream of passengers flooded out. Dad was squeezed in the middle of the crowd, carrying his same old backpack. He looked a lot thinner than when he left, but he was glowing with energy. There was a soft smile on his face, and the exhaustion in his eyes was completely gone, replaced by a calm, easy confidence. Mom stood right there, looking around anxiously, her eyes locked onto the crowd. The moment she finally spotted Dad,
A gentle smile slowly spread across her face.
When Dad saw us,
He waved at me first, and then turned his eyes toward Mom. He quickened his pace. "He's back. He's back," Mom whispered. Her voice was quiet, but it was filled with pure joy and relief. They just looked at each other for a moment, without saying a single word. Then Dad suddenly reached out and took the bag Mom was holding. He mumbled, "You're not young anymore. Why are you still carrying such heavy things? Don't you ever get tired?" Mom lowered her head with a gentle smile and said softly, "I brought some food for you." I knew you wouldn't feed yourself properly while you were away. On our way back home, none of the three of us brought up the things that had finally been laid to rest. Nor did we speak of the grievances or the mistakes of the past. We only talked about simple, everyday things, about what Dad had seen and heard out in the Northwest, and how Soja was doing with his job in Guangzhou. The air between us was light and warm. Our life felt like a towel that had been wrung dry by force, only to be let go at last, finally unfurling and softening once again, returning to the comfortable warmth of everyday life. Now Dad goes to the park every morning to practice Tai Chi, and occasionally drops by the neighborhood committee to share his old technical experiences with his former colleagues. His eyes are always shining with pride and confidence. As for Mom, she volunteers in the community now, helping out with the neighborhood cleaning. On top of that, he attended the legal education classes organized by the local judicial office. Slowly, he began to cheer up, and he started smiling more often. Zhuzhe settled down in Guangzhou, and things at work were finally looking up. Before leaving, he made sure to kowtow 3 times to his father. With a face full of guilt, he said, "Dad, Mom, Sis, I was so foolish back then and made so many mistakes. I'll never do anything stupid like that again. I'll work hard, live an honest life, and never make you worry about me again." His father helped him up, patted him on the shoulder, and said softly, "As long as you know you were wrong, that's all that matters. Just live a good, honest life from now on. That's better than anything else." In the evenings, my parents and I would sit in the living room and watch TV. Sometimes we'd watch the news, and other times, old movies. It was a peaceful and cozy atmosphere. Once, a news report about wage fraud came on, and my mother instinctively switched the channel, a flicker of panic crossing her face. My father glanced at her, then smiled and switched it right back, saying, "It doesn't hurt to watch more of this. If we know what kind of traps are out there, we won't get scammed again." My mother was stunned for a moment, but then she also smiled and nodded, saying, "Yeah, you're absolutely right. From now on, if anyone in this family ever tries to scheme for dividends again." My father looked at my mother and me, his tone firm. "I'll be the first to say absolutely not. If anything comes up, let's put it on the table and talk about it. No more keeping secrets or hiding things, and absolutely no more going down the wrong path." My mother and I both nodded, and the heavy weight crushing our hearts, finally, began to lift. Another half a year passed, when my father suddenly told me he wanted to go back to our hometown. "Your grandfather's ashes." He pointed at the small box in the corner of the living room and said with a solemn tone, "I want to take what's left of them back, to bury them beside the ancestral grave, so he can be reunited with your grandmother and your great-grandparents." "Are you going by yourself?" I asked. "No, I'm going with your mother," my father said. My mother, standing beside him, nodded gently. "If you're busy with work, you don't need to come along. The two of us will be just fine. It's a perfect chance to go back and visit our old home, to walk the paths we used to walk." I watch them. In that moment, they are standing at the doorway. The house behind them isn't very big. The furniture is simple, but there is an indescribable sense of peace and warmth. Suddenly I realize the storm that dragged our lives through the mud for several years has finally settled back into how things used to be. We are still a family, guarding this simple home, and guarding each other. As I walk them downstairs, Mom suddenly turns around, smiles, and says, "Your dad's pension card is in the drawer. The password is your birthday." I freeze for a second. I thought it wasn't my birthday before. "We changed it later," Mom says with a smile. "Your dad says you're his sweet little girl, so setting the password to your birthday is the only way he can rest easy." Dad shakes his head beside her, pretending to be serious. "Passwords are a private thing. Don't go blabbing about them. I'm only telling our daughter, that's all." Mom looks up at him and counters with a laugh. "Wanwan is our daughter. Would she ever mess with our money?" I watch their figures slowly fade around the corner of the stairwell. A profound sense of peace suddenly washes over me. All my past anxiety and unease are completely gone, leaving only a deep, solid sense of security. Back inside, the sunlight streams through the gaps in the curtains, leaving bright, warm patches across the floor. On the table lies the newspaper Dad didn't finish reading yesterday. Its corners are slightly curled. I walk over and gently smooth it out. On the local news page, there's an article about improving regulations on corporate employee compensation. Every word is filled with strict rules and formal terms. Standing by the window,
I stare at those lines of black ink. Suddenly, a powerful thought hits me.
Some things truly cannot be governed by rules and systems alone. But if even the people closest to us could just learn to lay everything out on the table,
Get the count straight, and fully share what's on their minds,
then so many tragedies that were bound to happen
could have been stopped right then and there.
I closed the newspaper,
Picked up the old photo album on the table,
And flipped to the very first page.
It was a photo of my father when he was young, competing in a company skills competition.
He was standing right next to a machine, his eyes filled with absolute focus.
With a faint smile playing on his lips.
He looked so proud and full of life.
Radiating all the passion and high hopes of his youth. Back then, he probably never would have imagined
The decades later, he'd be fighting for the pension he rightfully earned,
Running back and forth between the company and the courthouse.
swallowing all that humiliation. And he never would have guessed
that the woman who nagged him every day at home to bundle up
and eat his meals on time
would, in a corner hidden from his sight,
out of sheer anxiety and love for him.
take a bank card and make so many choices he could never understand.
But no matter what happened, now that the storm has finally passed, they are still standing together.
They still go grocery shopping together,
Take their evening strolls side by side, worry about my future together.
and slowly grow old together.
Thinking about this, I suddenly realize
No matter how messy the complications,
or how devastating the court's verdict, time will eventually wash them all away.
What truly stays in your heart aren't those cold, hard numbers or the crushing mistakes,
But the hands that held on tight, even when times got tough, and the love that refused to let go.
outside, the sound of children playing in the neighborhood drifts in through the window.
in the distance, someone is walking their dog,
And the ladies downstairs are sitting in the shade.
gossiping about life.
It's so full of the warmth of everyday life. I close the photo album, put it back on the shelf,
And walk over to the window.
I push open the window, and a breeze comes rushing in.
carrying think of dust, but also a strange, indescribable freshness. It sweeps away the very last of the gloom.
I know that from that day on, the numbers on my father's monthly pension checks will grow.
But far more important than those numbers is the way our family looks at money, at trust.
Out at each other.
It has all quietly changed.
Some wounds are still slowly healing, and some cracks might never fully fade.
But that's okay.
Because we've learned to be honest with each other. We've learned to forgive, to accept.
And we've learned to face every storm together.
I took that printed bank statement from back then and tucked it away at the very bottom of my drawer.
And I don't constantly pull it out to look at it anymore. The cold, hard numbers on that paper.
Used to keep me awake all night.
They made me doubt family, and they made me doubt myself. Looking at the now, they're nothing more than proof of a detour we had to take. A simple reminder to be honest, and a mark to cherish what we have. Outside, the light is slowly softening. As the sun goes down, it paints the room in a warm, golden orange. I take a deep breath, turn around, and walk into the kitchen
To brew myself a cup of chrysanthemum tea.
Inside the kettle, the water starts to heat up, bubbling and rumbling.
Sounding just like the gentle flow of time.
Suddenly, I find myself looking forward to my parents coming back from our hometown. We'll sit together in this cozy little living room, and I'll tell them all about my new plans for work.
And where I want to go next, now that I've been promoted.
Maybe one day, I'll tell this entire story to my own children, cover to cover.
Not so they remember a specific number,
Or dwell on a certain mistake.
but to help them understand
In this world, anything that rightfully belongs to you is worth fighting for with everything you've got.
that includes your money, your family,
And the trust that should never be betrayed.